Hi, this is J.C. Hutchins, author of the new thriller novel Seventh Son Descent in bookstores right now, and you're listening to Australia's finest skeptic podcast, The Skeptic Zone.
The Skeptic Zone, a miracle of technology. A universe of reason, the Skeptic Zone.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, show number 54 for the 30th of October 2009. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. On this week's show we have a panel recording from DragonCon 2009 with our good friend Kylie Sturgis, Martin Bridgestock, Dr. Eugenie Scott and a host of other skeptics, and they're talking about creationism and intelligent design and that sort of thing. And after that, we have an interview with the young New South Wales Scientist of the Year. Iran Sergeyev, our reporter, in his capacity of President of Australian Skeptics here in New South Wales, went along to the Young Scientist of the Year award and recorded an interview. After that, our relatively new segment from Kylie Sturgis, The Token Skeptic, keeping you up to date on skeptical events upcoming. And to wrap up the show, we have a few little snippets out of the radio show Dr. Rachie and I did here in Sydney on Radio 2GB with our good friend Glenn Wheeler. Now, if you want to hear the full radio appearance by Dr. Rachie and myself on 2GB, head for www.skepticzone.tv and we'll put that link in there for you. While you're there, you can check out a video I've posted of me and Stefan recording the intro and the outro for the last show. So, without any more ado, let's get on with this week's episode of The Skeptic Zone.
I'm Kylie Sturgis, and what follows is a recording of a panel discussion from the science track at DragonCon this year, called Darwin's Bulldogs, Teachers on the Front Lines. This panel was proposed by the moderator, Matt Lowry, who is a high school physics teacher and a part-time physics and astronomy college professor. Joining him was myself, Kylie Sturgis, C. Kevin Barrett, a writer and biological anthropologist, Martin Bridgestock of Griffith University and author of the forthcoming book, Beyond Belief, Skepticism, Science and the Paranormal, Barbara Drescher, a cognitive psychologist and lecturer at California State University Northridge, and our guest of honour, Dr. Eugenie Scott of the National Centre for Science Education. You'll be hearing us discuss our experiences with creationists and how to effectively counter their pseudoscientific nonsense whilst also promoting good science education.
As moderator, I just want to, I've got a little list of questions here, and maybe we can just kind of take them in turn, but we can also be sort of free-flowing and whatnot here. Much of the time, I think we've all experienced that the whole question, and this is kind of a biggie to start with, so maybe we can chew on this for a little bit. The whole question of creationism, evolution, and so on, you'll hear it framed by at least creationists in the United States. I don't know about other countries, but you'll hear it framed as evolution is anti-God, evolution is anti-religion, and you'll sometimes get people sort of on the other side too that also, like maybe Richard Dawkins, that also kind of tend to look at it in that sense, but on the pro-science side. So, especially in a country that is as religious as the United States. This, for some people, is kind of a powerful argument that I think drives them away from science or away from accepting evolution, and I just wanted to get the panel's thoughts on that particular point.
Okay, well, I'll start off. Dr. Scott knows far more about this area than I do, so if she says I'm wrong, then believe her and not me, okay? The first point I'd make is that if you say that evolution is anti-God, it depends on your definition of God, and it depends what you think God is doing. Now, there is a British scientist called Dennis Alexander, and he works in top scientific establishments, and he is a devout Christian. He believes that the Bible is the word of God. But for him, God is constantly responsible for maintaining all aspects of the universe. So if E equals mc squared, that's God. If DNA has a double helix, God is actively maintaining all scientific processes all the time. Now, therefore, from Alexander's point of view, evolution is one of the processes by which God is working in our universe. And therefore, from that viewpoint, no, evolution cannot possibly be anti-God because it is actually a divine process. Now, more generally, there's a misunderstanding of science here. Science, generally speaking, is a this-worldly process. Scientists are trying to understand how this world works in terms of the processes which go on in this world. Because you can't understand God by definition. You cannot simply read the mind of God and then do a science of how God is intervening in the world. Therefore, science is a human process concerned with working out how this universe works. And therefore, again, for that reason, science cannot be anti-God either.
I think there's another thing going on, not just with the concept of, how you define God, but also a lot of my students, when they do respond with, this is why I don't believe in evolution, they tell me, I don't believe in evolution because I believe that God created life. And that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what evolution is. So they're rejecting a theory they don't actually understand. They're rejecting something other than the theory itself. So I think there's two things going on. There's a misunderstanding of evolution, and first they have to understand that before they can really think about, does that conflict with my beliefs?
Actually, I'm at 5:30 as a plug for the next talk. 5:30 I'll be giving a talk on intelligent design and is it science? No.
For more details, go to Dr. Scott's talk.
The talk will be longer, actually.
Well, that's the abstract. But the first half of the lecture is going to be about the nature of science. What is science as a way of knowing, science as an epistemology, to use the big words. And basically, it's just like these, I think we're probably all in agreement up here. Science is a way of understanding the natural world. And there's something called methodological naturalism, which means that we restrict ourselves when we're wearing our scientist hat to explaining through natural causes. The reason why we restrict ourselves to natural causes is because those are the kinds we can test. And science fundamentally is all about testing your explanation. That's what makes it such a wonderful way of knowing. It gives us more reliable information than any other epistemology. Okay, so it's about testing explanations about the natural world. Well, how do we test an explanation? Well, we hold constant certain variables. You all kind of know that. I'm going really fast here, but you've all had 7th grade science, so you understand this. You hold constant certain variables. This is why we can't let supernatural explanations into science and still call it science. You cannot hold constant God's efforts. God is omnipotent. God can stay in the test tube or not go in the test tube at all. I mean, you can't put God in the test tube. So you just set God aside when you're explaining something using science. So we restrict ourselves to natural causes because those are the only kind we can test. And so for that reason, we use naturalism as a methodology. And I think every scientist understands that, and every scientist does that, whether they are believers or non-believers. Gregor Mendel was a theist, obviously, but he was also a methodological naturalist. He came up with his rules of genetics solely by using natural causes. He didn't bring in God at all. We criticize the intelligent design and creationist proponents for trying to bring God into science, because obviously you can't use God as an explanation and still call it science because you can't test God. What that means is there's a flip side. And the flip side is that you also can't say science proves God doesn't exist, for the same reason that you can't use God in science. God is omnipotent. You cannot control God's actions. You cannot test statements having to do with God. You have to just set God aside. That doesn't mean science is anti-God any more than long division is anti-God. Actually, when it comes to much of mathematics, were I a praying sort, I would pray a lot. But none of you do You do long division based on the natural process of mathematics. You do science based on natural processes. That doesn't make long division anti-religious. That doesn't make science anti-religious. Very few people think that cell division is an anti-religious theory. But once you're talking about human beings, once you're talking about living things, once you're talking about the issues that are important to people, that's when people start getting nervous about evolution as a science. And I think one of the ways that we need to cope with this is be very clear about what science is and what it isn't. Science is a way of knowing about the natural world, and we have to restrict ourselves to natural causes because those are the only ones we can test. That's kind of the mantra we want to get across to people. That doesn't mean that all scientists are atheists, because demonstrably they are not. But it does mean that science is a limited way of knowing. And we often don't think of science as a limited way of knowing. And it's sort of this hegemonic presentation of science that makes many conservative religious people very nervous about science, and they believe that the next statement to come out is that, well, therefore, take your God and show it. And that's not what science is all about. One of the main problems that we have, and which has been echoed by my colleagues with the creation and evolution issue, is that many non-scientists in the community believe that they have to choose between science and religion. If they really understand what science is and what it is good for and its limitations, that is not a necessary conclusion to come to. And I think they'll all be a lot more relaxed about the teaching of evolution to their kids.
That's a great point. I just want to share a quick anecdote about how I deal with this in my classroom as a physics teacher, because when I teach physics, I always go into cosmology, the Big Bang, and so on. And just so everybody knows, if you think that creationists only go after biological evolution, think again. Okay, they are targeting a lot of different areas of science in general, cosmology, geology. They're now starting to go after neuroscience. So it's not just talking about ninth grade biology. But the way I deal with this in my classroom is I tackle it right up front. That's one of the reasons I made it the first question here. I go into my students and I say, look, we're going to talk about Big Bang, cosmology, cosmic evolution, and so on. I said, but you guys got to remember, this is a science classroom here, right? We're not talking theology. We're not talking philosophy. You want to get into all of that stuff, you got to take a different course down the hall. And I said, some of you, I will be explaining the most current and best science we have, and some of you may have an internal conflict with your particular religious or philosophical beliefs. And then I put the onus on the student, because what I say is if you fall into this category, if you find that you have a problem reconciling your religious beliefs with the science I'm teaching, I leave that up to you to reconcile that. I'm going to assume that you are a mature enough person that you can figure it out for yourself, because it's not up to me to tell you what to believe or not believe about God. It's up to me to teach you science, and that's my job. That's the way I handle it, for whatever it's worth. Any other comments or questions on this particular point?
I can throw in a little bit. Sure. It appears to me, and I teach biological anthropology, so not only am I going to ask people to believe in evolution, I'm also going to ask them to believe that they have a common ancestor with, monkeys and apes, and that over the course of the last 6 or so million years, we have evolved from a primitive state to a slightly more advanced state. It appears to me, after teaching this for a number of years, that this is much more cultural than it is epistemological. I think that as scientists, we approach these things as epistemology, trying to understand what the nature of knowledge actually is. But most of our students are approaching this as a conflict of culture. And your culture is a set of values and beliefs that you get as sort of a unit. And you're not just able to go ahead and pick and choose what aspects of those culture you can accept and not accept. So in a way, it's that sort of baby with the bathwater argument. I think that in most cases, people are feeling like they're put to the point of either accepting everything that I have to say or none of it. And as I think most people here would agree, I think that's a sad sort of a state of affairs.
Just a quick point of order. If you do have a question, let's hold on to them for a little bit, because we will have Q&As at the end. So, thank you.
I have something really important to say.
Okay.
I'm taking a risk in doing this, but I'm hoping that this is a friendly audience and that you're sort of more or less on my side. And, I may be making a big mistake. This may end up on YouTube tomorrow, but I don't believe in evolution.
You said the other shoe drops.
I don't believe in the kinetic theory of matter. I don't believe in cell division. I don't believe in geocentrism.
This is a good point.
I'll tell you what I do believe in. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in regime change at the last election. I believe that we should do a lot of things to try to help our planet stay green. I believe that we should have universal health care. I believe that my husband is the best-looking, funniest, and smartest man in the world. But I don't believe in evolution. I would hope you don't either. Now, we get into that habit. We really do. We're members of society, right? Even we scientists are members of society. We don't talk about believing in the kinetic theory of matter, right? But we kind of fall into that trap of talking about the B word in connection with the E word. Try to break yourself of the habit of saying you believe in evolution, because you don't. But if people think evolution is a belief, well, then your belief is no better than my belief. A very good verb to substitute for that is accept. I actually accept evolution because right now, the idea that living things had common ancestors, that's what evolution is. The idea that living things had common ancestors is really the best explanation for fossils and the biochemistry and all these other kinds of sources of information. But it's not a belief. If somebody comes up with a better explanation 2 weeks from now, that'll be really fun. That'll give us a whole bunch of new science to do. It will not tear my heartstrings out like I'm losing my belief. Somebody called my husband ugly. No, it's not a belief. Okay, it's not a belief. So, linguistics do count. But it does count.
Wow. When Dr. Scott made that first statement, I could see an absolute collective state of shock over the whole room. It was like looking at 120 statues for a moment, and I was one of them as well.
Most of us up here knew what was coming. So.
I guessed it after a moment, but being rather slow thinking, I'm still suffering from jet lag. It took me that moment to see it. Yeah, look, in that sense, sure. I mean, I've been called an evolutionist, and that term is false.
Not an evolutionist either.
I believe that if there was sufficient evidence against the theory of evolution so that it was overthrown, then I believe it should be thrown out. I do believe that that's probably not going to happen because, as I understand it from the work of scientists, the evidence is so massive that evolution or something like it is pretty well certain to have occurred. We can say that with a great deal of confidence. But yes, therefore, in the sense of believing, in the sense that one believes in a religious faith or believing in an ism, yeah, that's right. We don't regard evolution or any other scientific theory like that. They are, in fact, established scientific theories, explanations of the universe. And generally speaking, and here's a bold generalization, whenever science has concluded that a theory explains the evidence and should be accepted as the only explanation, the rest of us, I mean, they're human, they make mistakes just like the rest of us. The rest of us can have a pretty fair degree of confidence that that theory or something like it is something very close to the truth.
I just wanted to say that whenever someone asks me a question with that word believe, and I do this with a lot of words like this, I always qualify it by saying, if by believe you mean I currently hold true, and then go from there. I like that word accept, though, so that's shorter.
Yeah, I actually hardly ever use the word theory either. Me either. Because to scientists, theory means explanation, and it means generally a well-founded explanation, something that's got a lot to back it up. It doesn't mean hunch, you know. We have a booth over here, y'all come and visit. Buy one of these great T-shirts like this guy in the front room is in the front. Isn't that a wonderful T-shirt? I had this great conversation with a man who came to my booth, and he said, well, you know, he saw all this evolution stuff on the table, right? And he said, well, you know, I don't know. I think there'd be a lot fewer problems if they just taught evolution as a theory rather than a fact. So this is a teachable moment, right? No, that's not going to do it. This is a teachable moment. So, you know, what do you mean by theory? And, of course, what he meant by theory was guess or hunch or something that was not really. And so, you know, we talked a little bit more about, you know, about how one of the things that I tell science teachers to do when parents or students say, well, evolution is just theory, it's not, scientists are giving up on evolution, that's one of the memes that's out there. Say, well, send that student to your local community college or college library and just have them pick up a half a dozen journals or so and flip through the contents and see if there's any article in any of those journals, Science or Nature, Cell, whatever. See if there's any article in any of those journals that questions whether evolution took place, questions whether living things had common ancestors. What you will find is a lot of research going on about the details, about the tree of life, or about mechanisms of change. You find a lot of science going on about the details. Let me know if you find anything, any article saying, well, maybe living things didn't have common ancestors. See if there's anything like that. And of course, the kids actually aren't going to do it, but they feel that if they did, they're going to believe the teacher more now. But if a student does this, the student is not going to find that evolution is the shaky kind of science at all, which is a very useful thing for students to know.
Okay. I want to kind of keep things moving along here, but I've got a couple of other things to get at, because one of the things I want to do is get to sort of a pragmatic angle. How do you deal with this if you're a teacher or if you're a parent, and how do you advocate for good science, but and against this anti-scientific stuff? But one thing I think it's very important for people to understand is that, and this became very clear to me from an article that Dr. Scott wrote years ago. There are many different kinds.
I keep thinking my uncle is here. He's, we all call each other, I'm Jeannie,
oh, okay.
we call each other.
I call you Jeannie, sorry.
And my uncle is Dr. Scott.
Jeannie wrote this great article, and it really drives the point. There are many different versions and forms of creationism. Right? I think maybe we make a mistake on our side sometimes by painting with too broad a brush, because there really are differences within the creationist movement, and they can really disagree on a lot of things, and so this is an important thing to note too. So let's maybe throw that out there for a few minutes of discussion, and then we'll get on to some other pragmatic things. Fire away.
Anybody?
Okay, I'll start.
I haven't actually seen that.
Okay, well, I'll give you one example. For example, you often hear creationists make the argument, for example, that we should teach all views. Okay, we should teach all views in the classroom. Yes, well, they don't. Yeah, when they say we should teach all views, it's kind of a slimy maneuver, because they're not really meaning all views. Because then you can counter the argument and say, oh, well, should we teach the Muslim version of creationism? And in this particular country, that's really not a popular option among
fundamental Christians.
And so there's that angle. But then. You can start the flying spaghetti monster. But sticking with just creationism, I've seen many different styles of creationism, such as you have the what many of us think of as the biblically literal fundamentalist creationists. Those are the young Earth creationists, YECs. Then you have the old Earth creationists. These are people who accept that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, or that the universe is 13.7 billion years old. And Hugh Ross is a good example of this. He's a great example of an old Earth creationist, because he believes in all of the cosmology and accepts all of that, but he doesn't accept biological evolution. Okay, and you have people everywhere in between, and then you also have folks that go into this idea that they just want to push the Bible literally, for one thing, and then you have people on the other hand who want to try to do everything they can to seem like they're avoiding pushing religion, but they really are, and those are what I call the intelligent designers, the people at the Disco Institute, as I like to call it, because disco is useless and dead. So any comments in that vein?
Well, I don't know if this is much use, but I know that in my state, the Gravity Centre up in Gingin, which is an educational centre, it is run by scientists, and one way that they decided to sort of thumb their nose at the notion that, all theories, or more accurately 2 theories should be promoted, was that they created a large mural which had 7 different theories of how the universe began, including how the local Aboriginal population believed that their world was created. And often I try to point that out as an example of how, right, fine, let's have them all. And it's quite a beautiful piece. I'm hoping to see if I can interview the people up there about what led them to take this stance.
And what was the reaction by the local, what we might think of as standard creationists to that effort?
It was sort of more like, I don't know if this is, sort of like, yeah.
Careful what you wish for, you just might get it, folks. It's really interesting. I don't know if any of you have watched Penn and Teller's show on Showtime called, the children may listen to this, so P.S. But they did this excellent, in their first season, they did this excellent piece where they had Jeannie on, and they talked about creationism, and they made this excellent little skit. They were talking about the Raelians. Okay, now for those of you who don't know, the Raelians, the Raelians are, now, there are only about 50,000 Raelians in the in the world, I think. So I'm thinking I'm on pretty good ground here in assuming that none of them are present. So I'm going to say this just like I think. The Raelians are, from what I understand, a New Age atheistic UFO cult. Okay, and they believe in intelligent design. They just think that the intelligent designer were space aliens instead of God. Somehow the folks at the Discovery Institute are not looking to they're not looking to ally themselves with the Raelians, and I don't know why, even though they advocate for intelligent design. Okay, so.
But one thing that they do at the Discovery Institute, though, is they use that as a doorway to say, this isn't about religion. So they don't exactly actively refute it either, because that allows them to say, well, there are plenty of people who believe in intelligent design, and they don't believe that it's God.
The ideas have this very interesting, I'll be talking about this at 5:30 also, so you can skip the talk now. But they have this very strange way of looking at creationists are real enthusiasts for dichotomizing things. The intelligent design people dichotomize cause. They have natural cause and intelligent cause. Those are the 2 kinds of causes they recognize. Now, natural cause is all the kind of stuff we would be familiar with. That's the regular laws of nature. Fine. Everybody agrees with that. Over here on the intelligent cause column, they have things like, God, that's one intelligent cause. They have human beings, another type of intelligent cause. We create things, obviously. To some degree, there's some debate. Maybe the higher primates or dolphins, they have intelligence, and of course, space aliens. I mean, that's also over there on the intelligent cause line. But what's kind of intriguing here is that most of those commodities over there on the intelligent cause part of the diagram really are natural. Human beings, space aliens are material beings as well. Higher primates, dolphins, all of those are really natural objects. They belong over here in natural cause. So really, when you come right down to it, the only intelligent cause that the intelligent design people are really talking about is transcendent cause. It's God. And when you really kind of nail them down to, what kind of intelligence would be involved in especially creating the bacterial flagellum, right? Time-traveling biochemists, perhaps, as Michael Behe once suggested. I hope not really seriously. No, obviously not. They're talking about God. So it's really just rolling the pea under a different shell. And this they call science.
Regarding this business of there being many creationisms, I actually raised this and I threw it at creationists in Australia, and they were the extreme young Earth 6 24-hour-day creationists, and the response was that theirs was the only true form of religion. Other religions, of course, Islam, Hinduism, all the rest of them, they of course are all wrong, they're all damned. Furthermore, anybody who compromises with atheistic, devil-inspired evolutionism is therefore compromising with wrong views, and they're on a slippery slope which leads inevitably to atheism and to damnation. Now, that is the way that they see things.
And they're not the only kind. They're not the only kind of creationist that does that. Fundamentalist Muslim creationists will do the same thing.
Yes, there are a whole set of different kinds of fundamentalists, but we'll focus on this Christian creationist one. And as a result of that, I began to see how they think. Now, there may well be people in this room who understand this better than I do, but the way they think is that their views must be held in their entirety, or they are damned. Now, therefore, you can understand the kind of hysteria and fear that they are in when, for example, they send their children to school, and, fundamentalists love their children just as much as anybody else, and the children come home and they start to talk about old Earth and they start to talk about evolution, and therefore, from their perspective, their children are damned. Or you can imagine fundamentalist teachers in school. They must impart the true message, or else the children that they are teaching are damned. So they're in a kind of sustained state of hysteria and fear. And always in the background, there are the coals of hell. As far as I can tell, that's how they think.
That's a good point. Now,
I'm talking about Queensland, over near the deep north in Australia.
It's not any different here. It's not any different here.
Now, I want to get at a point that was made here by Jeannie a moment ago, and this, of course, kind of dovetails into the next couple of points I wanted to tackle, and it also dovetails into what you just said, because in my experience, what you've got is two broad classes of people who sort of form the creationist movement. In my opinion, you've got the people who are true believers, like what you just described. And these are people who are legitimately concerned because they think that if their children learn this, they're going to hell, and they're afraid. Okay, and then you've got what I call the cynics, and these are the people who I think, for lack of a better term, run the show at places like the Discovery Institute, because they know they're lying, but they do it anyway. And this goes to a point that Jeannie just made. The people at the Discovery Institute will say, "Oh, this isn't about religion. It isn't about God." Well, let me ask you all a question. How many of you have heard about this little thing released by the Discovery Institute inadvertently in the 90s called the Wedge document? Okay, if you don't know about the Wedge document and you're at all concerned about this topic, Google it, all right? Because this lays bare their agenda. And I just want to read a couple of quotes here, right? We actually have copies of the Wedge document up here you can grab afterwards if you're interested. This is not about religion. Design theory promises to reverse the stifling dominance of the materialist worldview and to replace it with a science consonant with Christian and theistic convictions. One of the 20-year goals of the Discovery Institute: to see design theory permeate our religious, cultural, moral, and political life. No, it's not about religion. You tell me.
I noticed something, Matt. You don't have a creationist up here. That's something this panel really lacks. So.
Oh, that's a good point.
I'll move on.
Okay, fire away.
Now, you have just presented a distortion of the intelligent design perspective. Because obviously intelligent design has philosophical or religious overtones, but so does evolution. I mean, look at somebody like G.G. Simpson. Look at somebody like.
You can't even do it with a straight face.
I was trying not to make noise.
It was Barb's turn to facepalm.
Look, I mean, G.G. Simpson, any number of other famous paleontologists and evolutionary biologists have said over and over that evolution is. Richard Dawkins himself has said that evolution makes it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Now, Clearly, if evolution has all of these religious implications, it must be okay for intelligent design to have religious implications. Nobody's saying that evolution is religious just because there's religious implications. Now, intelligent design is a solid science. It's a way of understanding design in the natural world. We just want intelligent design to be taught as a legitimate scientific undertaking, but unfortunately, we're being persecuted by the establishment.
My response is very pithy. If intelligent design is a science, name the vaccine that you made using intelligent design, please.
Well, look how long it took Pasteur to come up with vaccine. I mean, my goodness, the intelligent design is in its infancy. We can't possibly be expected to come up with something like vaccines. And we are exploring a field that integrates biology and informatics and statistics. And you're expecting, I mean, this is a complicated endeavor.
Well, let me give another answer.
I just like to know one fact, and I think that's where you're going. There is no theory, and there are no facts. There are statements that have been made, such as there's irreducible complexity and so forth, which have been falsified. At least the evidence that they presented has been falsified. So it hasn't produced anything. And vaccine, way far away from that. So you actually have to have something to present other than God did it. Or, I'm sorry, not God did it, an intelligent designer. An intelligent agent designed it. And it's also backwards, it's post hoc.
The Jeannie's doing a good job here playing devil's advocate, because this is an excellent point, because this leads right into the next thing. And I'm taking a look at my watch, and we can probably maybe spend about a little over 10 minutes on this next point. And this is probably a very good place to do this now, is talk about the tactics that creationists will use, and how can one effectively counter these tactics. Because one thing that they're very good about, we all agree that they're lousy about science, okay? But they're very good at PR. Very good at PR. So how do you recognize it, and how do you address it? Either as a teacher, a student, a parent, an advocate, whatever. So let's open it up.
This is one thing I've come across as an English teacher. There is a popular study guide that is published in my state, and now I believe it's being published in some other states, a group called Creelman. And Creelman Publishing, what they do is produce study notes and little quizzes for some of the final year's exams of high school. And they are very neatly packaged, very glossy, and they promote creationism in the final pages of the book and in the inside cover of the book. I found it while teaching English. Yes, whilst teaching. All the study notes within are excellent. They're written by very good study guide writers, but the entire thing is packaged within a bit of propaganda. You might be entertained to know that even the human biology study guide, which explicitly teaches evolution, is still packaged in creationist text. And many schools buy Creelman's study guides because it's a nicely packaged one, and it just pops onto the school lists of half a dozen schools, and probably very few teachers pick it up, flick to the back pages, and notice that it's saying, well, of course, this mathematics textbook is demonstrating how there is indeed a natural order in the world, and we can attribute that natural order to, writing to the principals was my strategy, pointing it out at the English Teachers Association meeting that we had, and pointing out to a few teachers that maybe you might like to try an alternative text in the future.
How do you spell it?
Creelman's, Creelman. I've written about it on my blog at www.podblack.com, and I can email you a copy. I took photos of it and everything. I was quite happy to go down and purchase a few copies. It made it a lot easier for me to go up to meetings and say, hi, did you see page 64 and what it's saying?
Another tactic that creationists will use, and a good way to counter it, and this is exactly how the Darwin's Bulldogs group north of Chicago got started, is watch your local letters to the editor, right? Because I get the sense that what creationists will do is when they plan on moving in, so to speak, into an area to try to maybe take over a school board, because this sort of thing almost happened near where I live, that I think what they'll do is, at least the way I view it, is they'll probe with these letters to the editor, and they'll see if they get challenged. And because years ago there were all these letters to the editor suddenly popping up about creationism in my local paper, and I couldn't understand it. And sure enough, a couple of years after that, there was a major push by the religious right to take over one of the biggest school districts near in the country, and it was right near where I live. And folks, if they had been successful, it would have been the next Dover. I can guarantee that. Okay, so the way that Darwin's Bulldogs got started is I personally got tired of seeing all these creationist letters, and nobody was countering them. So I started talking to colleagues and other people, and we started writing our own letters back. And now you barely see any creationist letters in our local paper anymore. They lost that fight. Anything else? What else? What other tactics, or what can we do?
I would strongly encourage, especially scientists, but anybody who is discussing this issue with someone, especially if they're under creationist persuasion. Creationists at the Discovery Institute and elsewhere have been dining out on scientific dogmatism for years. They present the science community as dogmatic and closed-minded, and they aren't even listening to us. That sells very well in the United States. We love underdogs, okay? They're not underdogs. What I would encourage you to respond if you hear this argument is to say, well, actually, the scientific community did examine their claims. There is quite a literature out there discussing intelligent design or creation science, whatever the topic is. There are many books, there are many articles. Much of this is online as well. It's accessible to the public. We didn't just look down our patrician scientific noses at them and dismiss them out of hand. A new idea was presented. We treated it like any other new idea. When Dembski's book came up, when Behe's book came up, these books were seriously reviewed by the scientific community. And when the intelligent design people started holding these conferences at which they would invite real scientists and then they'd present the intelligent design stuff, the real scientists would say, okay, here's where you're wrong, or here's where you went astray, fix this, this, and this. And the intelligent design people would say, thank you so much for coming to our conference. It was just wonderful that we had this great dialogue. And then 2 months later, they'd have another conference and bring another bunch of virgin scientists, and they'd be told the same things. Here's where you're wrong, fix this, this, and this. And this process, rinse and repeat. They were told over and over what the mistakes of intelligent design were in content as well as in methodology, and they have ignored the scientific response. This is why they are ignored by the scientific community. But it's very important that the public understand that they weren't dismissed out of hand. There are arguments and ideas were examined. There is an extensive literature analyzing intelligent design. Be sure that the people you're talking with understand that.
They still aren't either. There are forums where people will debate them seriously. Michael Shermer does that once in a while with Hugh Ross and so forth, and it's interesting to watch. But
get me started on debates.
Okay, I can just compare with what happened in Queensland. Intelligent design doesn't seem to be a threat. It doesn't exist there. The big threat, the massive threat, which nearly took over Queensland education system, was creation science. And I remember way back, it was 25 years ago now, an enthusiastic fundamentalist put into my hand a pile of highly coloured creationist magazines. And he got me to promise that I would read them. And I read them. And they're the same kind of arguments that you get over here. In fact, most of them were pinched from over here. And I read them. And if you just read their literature, you simply look at it, it creates the impression of a mass of genuine scientific evidence, because they do quote real scientists. They quote them, they cite them, they refer to them, they summarize them. And it gives the impression of this titanic mass of evidence which is going to sweep aside all this evolutionary nonsense, and then the truth will emerge, and we all know what that is. So this reflects so badly on my own intelligence. It took me several weeks to figure out what to do next. What I did was I took the highly coloured scientific magazines, those creationist magazines, down to my university library, and when they referred to a scientist, I checked it. And what I found was that the quotes were 90% blatantly false. For example, they would quote a scientist and they would alter the words that the scientist had written to mean something quite different. Or they would take some data and they would misrepresent what it meant. And the statistics I came up with, there were two statistics. First, that 90% of creationist references to science were blatantly false. They misrepresented the evidence. And secondly, that on average, every creationist reference to science had two mistakes. One was a major one, which was invalidated. The other one was a minor one, like getting the author wrong or the page wrong or the date wrong. Now, those of you who are awake will say, well, if 90% of them were false, what about the 10% that weren't false? Well, the answer is that these 10% were non-contentious. One of them, for example, was a report that an American X-ray satellite had taken X-ray pictures of the Sahara Desert and had discovered that it had been wet at one stage. Okay, well, that's non-contentious. There's nothing...
Proof of the flood.
Yeah, exactly. You can take it as proof of the flood, but it's also perfectly compatible with modern geological theory. So those 10% were non-contentious. Wherever the evidence was contentious, wherever they claimed that the evidence showed that creationism was right, then they misrepresented. As a result of that, I was then able to write a couple of dozen papers, which went to teachers' magazines, school librarians' magazines, and things like that, making it an issue of integrity. Not an issue of religion, but an issue of integrity. Do we want our children to be subjected to this kind of blatant misrepresentation? And the creationists absolutely hated it.
I wanted to mention one more thing that, citizens and people can do as a way of battling this pseudoscience. And actually, Kylie said something a few minutes ago that jogged my memory on this. If you've ever heard of this thing called the internet, start a blog. I did. I started a blog about 9 months ago. It's called The Skeptical Teacher. Google it. It's enormously easy to do. You can actually, if you use a few tricks to get traffic to it, you can actually reach a very wide audience. If you're on Facebook, advertise it through Facebook, and represent the pro-science point of view among your own circle of friends and acquaintances, and basically go viral with it. Because I was actually amazed, because I blather about this stuff all the time. My wife looked at me one day and said, "You should really start a blog," which was code for "Honey, I love you, but shut up."
Tell somebody who cares.
And so I did, and I could not believe how quickly it took off. So that's something else you can do. Check your letters to the editor, respond in the letters to the editor, respond to the comments sections to letters to the editor. Respond on message boards, blog. There's all kinds of things that normal everyday people can do to counter this stuff.
One of the interviews that we did for the Skeptic Zone, intriguingly enough, the gentleman in question wished to be anonymous, so we had to record our questions, send it to them. They recorded their questions, sent it back to us, and we put it together. Potholer54 on YouTube, who has, he is Australian, we're very proud to say, despite the lovely British accent, but then you two are Australian too, aren't you, Martin? So, yes. Potholer54 has created YouTube videos which are available to be downloaded and sent out to people, and that's another way of essentially doing an audio blog. And of course there's podcasts, the fact that we as CTEG members, Thinking Education Group, we got together via the internet, and this is the first time that 3 of the members of the group have managed to get together. It was just purely via emails, forum boards, and appearances at conferences and networking that way. And we hope to do more and touch base with even more teachers and share experiences and ideas.
To learn more about the panellists, you can check out the National Centre for Science Education at ncseweb.org. C. Kevin Barrett's site is at ckevinbarrett.com, and the blogs of myself, Matt Lowry, and Barbara Drescher can be found at hotblack.com, skepticalteacher.wordpress.com, and icbseverywhere.com.
Hi, this is Travis from Granite State Skeptics to tell you about our upcoming investigation of an allegedly haunted location this Halloween here in New Hampshire. We will be posting our findings live on Twitter, and if technology permits, we will be streaming live video as well. Following the event, we will be meeting at the Hannah Dustin Memorial in Boscawen, New Hampshire to go over the findings and take questions. After that, we will be inviting all those that attend along on another investigation in Manchester. It should be great fun, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. You can follow along at twitter.com/GSskeptics and get more details at granitestateskeptics.org. Enjoy the rest of the Skeptic Zone.
The Young Scientist Awards are awarded annually by the Science Teachers Association of New South Wales. On the 26th of October, I attended the Young Scientist Award ceremony as a representative of Australian skeptics and had the pleasure of seeing budding scientists aged 6 to 18, and I'm not joking, being honoured for outstanding works of science. Awards were given to all finalists, which were grouped by age: kindergarten to year 2, years 3 to 6, years 7 to 9, and years 10 to 12. Special awards were also given for special achievements in various fields of science, followed by the Grand Awards. The award for Young Scientist of the Year 2009 went to Ethan Butson from the Illawarra Grammar School in Wollongong. After the ceremony, I caught up with Ethan for a short conversation. This is Aran Segev. I'm at the Young Scientist Awards presented by the Science Teachers Association of New South Wales, and I'm sitting here with the Young Scientist of the Year for 2009, Ethan Butson. Hello, Ethan.
Hello.
Do you want to tell me about the project that you did that won you this wonderful award?
Alright, the project that I was doing was I was trying to find a new measure, or something to measure with, ultraviolet radiation. Oh, I heard about this film that was left outside near the windowsill, and it turned a deeper blue colour than it was actually originally. So I decided that I wanted to do a few experiments with this film to see if it actually could measure some type of radiation. So I did a few tests. One, I put it under incandescent lights, which just puts out visible and a little bit of heat. And over 8 days, really no change occurred. Then I put it in the oven for 50 degrees and for about 5 minutes, and no change occurred there. So since there are 3 types of electromagnetic radiation that are being irradiated from the sun, which is ultraviolet, visible light, and infrared, which is heat, I had to assume that it was affected by ultraviolet radiation.
And I believe you drew a calibration chart, is that correct?
Yes, a calibration curve. I used the information, which was, I found the net optical density, and then I versed that versus the exposure, and then it come up with the trend line, and then via that trend line I found an equation that was best for all of the results, and that pretty much allowed me to extremely easily, with that equation, to find out how long and what exposure the ultraviolet radiation sensitive film, EBT GAF chromic, was exposed to.
That is absolutely fantastic. Now I want to point out that, as I mentioned to you earlier, a lot of people in the audience kind of had an inkling that you could be the winner because you were on the stage, about 4 or 5 times through the evening?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, so that was not a huge surprise, but obviously very, very pleasing to see you there. It's a great achievement. And now, obviously, this is a recording, so people don't see you, and they also haven't heard what happened here during the proceedings, so they don't know how old you are. Would you tell us how old you are and what year you're in?
I'm in year 7. I'm turning 14 in December.
So obviously the achievement of winning this award is even more amazing considering your age. Very well done. Congratulations, Ethan.
Thank you.
Yeah, right, guys. I was talking to Richard Saunders the other day.
All right.
He said if we record a trailer for our podcast, Skeptics with a K, he'd play it on their show.
Oh, that's nice of him. That's very generous.
It's pretty good. I'm not sure what we could do, though. I mean...
Well, I suppose you tell people what the show's about.
But it's basically just this.
Yeah, but we talk about science and skepticism and things.
That's true. I suppose you mentioned the website address.
What, Merseyside.skeptics.org.uk?
Yeah, or just search us on iTunes. Oh, and then we could end with a big song like The Skeptics with a K podcast.
No, don't do that.
Welcome to The Token Skeptic, quick roundup of blogs, sites, podcasts and conferences coming up. The Australian Skeptics National Convention is even closer now. Our very own Dr. Rachel Dunlop will be presenting in Brisbane at the University of Queensland from November the 27th to the 29th. Dr. Martin Bridgestock, who you just heard on the panel discussion for this week's episode, will be doing a book launch for Beyond Belief, Skepticism, Science and the Paranormal. This has been published by Cambridge University Press and should be of interest to all of those keen on either learning or teaching about skepticism. The Australian Skeptics website at skeptics.com.au has further details. Monster Talk Podcast is now partnered with Skeptic Magazine and Skepticality Podcast. Head on over to monstertalk.org to listen to the podcast team talk about the science behind cryptozoological and legendary creatures such as Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, werewolves and Benjamin Radford. Tim Minchin is about to start his second Australian tour, and you might still be able to find tickets by checking timminchin.com. The Ready for This Tour DVD has been released in Australia for about a month now, so if you haven't had the chance, you can still see the show at home and download the songs on iTunes. Finally, the Rise of Atheism conference is not deterred by denial of service attacks. Their website is working fine, and they are still selling tickets at atheistconvention.org.au.
And now enjoy a few snippets of the radio show Dr. Rachie and I did with Glenn Wheeler on Sydney's radio, 2GB.
Okay, let's look at some alternate examples of where you guys like to analyse whether it's true or not. And I mentioned earlier on about the spoon bending exercise, Uri Geller, who was, I guess probably more famous, in the 70s?
70s, drifting into the 80s. He sort of tried to have a comeback in the 90s, I think. He's still buzzing around the place. Yeah.
Still bending spoons?
Oh, yeah. That's one of his 4 tricks.
With one of 4 tricks?
He does.
Oh, you're such a bitch. You are such a bitch.
Now, spoon bending is a trick you can learn from the books.
But he does it so easily with one finger.
Well, I tell you what, grab that spoon.
Oh, here we go.
I'm passing Glenn a spoon at the moment.
You just happen to have a spoon with you,
I do, Rachie. You have a spoon too.
Okay.
I've got a spoon here.
Righto.
Now, you happy with that spoon?
Yeah. It's a metal spoon, folks. It's a silver metal teaspoon that you would have in your cutlery drawer.
Give it a little flex like that.
Yep.
Just make sure it's nice and firm. Okay, you're happy with that spoon, right?
Yep.
You're happy it's a real spoon. Now, pass that one back to me for a second.
Yep.
Now, you take that one. Right, now, what I'm going to do is hold up your spoon, right?
Yep.
Hold it right there.
Yep.
Start to wiggle the bottom, and you'll see an optical illusion taking place. Now, I'm just wiggling my spoon. See how that looks like it's getting rubbery and bending?
Yeah. I can see what you mean. Yeah.
And the more you do it, the more it looks like it's getting rubbery and bending.
Yeah, actually,
almost looks like it's made out of plastic, right?
Actually, yours is bending. No, come on. Hang on. No.
Like I said...
Hang on.
A trick you can learn
Did you see that, Nick?
Out of a book.
Nick's sitting outside doing our phones tonight. Now listen, come on. Now do it with that spoon. There we go.
All right. What I'll do with this... You take that one. What I'll do with this spoon, because I get too many spoons...
Didn't you bend that spoon?
I've got lots of spoons back here. Hold that spoon like that.
Did you bend this spoon? Was this the one you bent?
No, this is the one it's broken.
Yeah, you broke it. How did you break it?
Like I said.
This is unbelievable.
Well, you take that one now, right? Just rub it here. Just rub it like that. Instead of breaking it, we'll try to make this end curl up. There, see? See how that's curling up? Like that.
Yeah. Oh, stop it. Hang on.
This is a really good trick for radio, isn't it?
It's a great trick.
This is... that is bizarre. Right. I've never seen you do that before. Let me just tell the people at home, because you're right, Rachel, that's a very good observation on your part. This is radio, so people at home going, what the hell are they doing? We're doing the Uri Geller exercise here, and I've got the Australian Skeptics sitting in here showing me that, what Uri Geller used to do all those years ago on the Don Lane Show and various other programs was all BS.
It's a trick. Now, the thing about spoon bending is it's a great trick, and magicians have been doing it for years and entertaining people legitimately and making many people happy. If someone comes along and says, it's not a trick, it's doing it through mystical forces and I've got special powers, it's sort of like, that's just spoiling it for the magicians, it's spoiling it for the audience who have come along to see a good performance. And as you can see, I've just done it right here in the studio, better than Geller.
I'm still amazed what you just did, because you didn't just bend the spoon, you broke the spoon.
Yeah.
And you did it without force.
That's the hallmark of a good trick. If it looked like a trick, it'd be a terrible trick. It has to look like you're using mystical, magical forces.
Rachel, I'm fascinated by the medical aspect of all of this because, obviously, as you said before, the weak and the vulnerable, people who are suffering with terminal diagnosis, are going to look for anything and everything to try and cure them or at least extend their life or give them some quality of life.
Yeah.
So, what are the sorts of examples of things that you've looked at that have proven to be absolute rubbish?
There's so many, Glenn, but I suppose one of the things that's really dangerous and nasty is when people claim that they've got cancer cures. And there was an incident recently in South Australia where a woman was running an alternative medicine clinic, and she was claiming she could cure cancer by prescribing KFC to patients.
Oh my God!
And people believed it. And these people have terminal cancer, so as you say, they're desperate and they're ill and they know they're going to die.
Gee, that's not even funny. I mean, it's not even, you can't even laugh at that and say, well,
no. I mean, a lot of the things we deal with are great fun. They really are. We have an enormous amount of fun, but some of the things are terribly serious.
Yeah, and of course you probably also remember recently the case of the young girl who died as a result of contracting or having a bad case of eczema. And her parents were recently committed and charged with manslaughter because they didn't get her eczema treated and they were using homeopathy. And homeopathy, there's really no evidence that it does anything either, in fact. That's another story. We could talk about that sometime if you're interested. But when people are suffering because of the claims made by what we call quacks, that's when it does really, really a lot of harm.
It's 40 minutes to 9. We've just about run out of time with this. We've got more calls. We could probably do this for an hour, because people love talking about ghosts and all sorts of things like this, and sharing an experience. So we might reconvene with this down the track in a few weeks' time.
Sounds like good fun.
I think it'd be good fun. We could make a bit of a regular segment of this and let people share their stories and their experiences. And who knows, we might be able to find somebody out there that's going to take you on for that $100,000. I'd like to see that.
We'd like to see it too. It's been going for almost over 30 years almost.
And in fact, we may even one night we might invite somebody into the studio to learn how to bend spoons as well, because
that would be fun.
I have seen that. Luke has seen that. Nick has seen that tonight, and I'll tell you what, it was amazing to say the very least. Rachel and Richard, thank you very much for coming into the studio to join us tonight.
Not a problem. Just
thanks very much.
Quickly mention in the meantime, if people want to find out more, they can go to www.skepticzone.tv or www.skeptics.com.au.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. It's 13 minutes to 9. Another very special guest coming up after this.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Skeptic Zone. And thank you to those people who are actually now subscribing at 99 cents an episode to The Skeptic Zone to help us keep the show going. You can do that via the PayPal links at www.skepticzone.tv. Of course, this is purely voluntary. If you want to subscribe, it helps us enormously. If not, that's fine. Keep enjoying the show. Until next week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
The Skeptic Zone.